Hello, my name is Justin Leclue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today, we're talking about a universe. Some would say a dark universe.
Yes, back in 2012, I think that's the year it was, when Marvel's The Avengers was released, a film that it changed the way that business was done in Hollywood. No longer were there merely a movie, and then if it was successful, a sequel. Now, every studio was thinking about cinematic universes. Studios were looking at what are the properties they own and thinking, well, can we make... What was the studio that was thinking of doing a Robin Hood and His Merry Men universe?
Well, every single one of them had a Robin Hood project up their sleeve. Here's the thing about cinematic universes. Me and Will talked about, we should do an episode on that and just talk about all the failed ones. The issue with this is they're all failed ones because none have been able to get off the ground and become something that in a pop culture sense, everyone knows. In North America, at least. I'll say in India, there's an odd police universe where all the different... We saw one of the movies.
Yeah, I forgot what it was called.
Yeah, police heroes team up at the end of it.
I mean, what Marvel did just from an architectural standpoint was brilliant in that, they had Iron Man and they had the Hulk and Captain America and Thor, and one by one you fall in love with each of these characters, and then they all come together and it's like, oh boy, all these characters I love are together, and then you're hooked for life. So that was brilliant, just how they did that.
And the one company who had done it before and should have easily been able to do it again is Universal Pictures.
And this is what we're focusing on in this episode. Universal Pictures, the House of Frankenstein, the House of Dracula, the hilarious House of Frightenstein.
Abbott and Costello
meet something or other.
The Dracula, the monsters.
Listen, folks, it is the studio that is synonymous with monsters. It is a studio that back in the 1940s had its own little View Askew universe of Frankenstein meeting the Wolfman.
They did it the lowest energy, don't care you could back then.
Yeah. Well, because
people ate it up.
It was for children and undiscriminating audiences back then. And a lot of them were wonderful. Mm-hmm. But
a lot of them were bad as well.
Well, Justin is referring to I think specifically the 1940s ones, not the original.
No. I'm
Bride
talking
of Frankenstein.
About the late period. We need a couple of quick bucks. Let's get the C-list directors in here making House of Dracula, House of Frankenstein.
Your Earl C. Kentons, your Lambert Hilliers, people like that. But folks, I bet you haven't heard any other film podcasts that have mentioned Lambert Hillier. That's what makes us the gods.
I know exactly who that is too.
So obviously in 2012, this sparked multiple attempts by Universal to create their own universe with their mostly by now public domain monsters. But, it's a studio associated with monsters.
They own the rights to the way they look specifically, which was an issue with something like the Monster Squad, where Frankenstein's monster doesn't look like the Universal one. That was also an issue with the Hammer horror films. When they did their Frankenstein pictures, they had to have a different design than the Universal one.
However, even before the Avengers, for years and years, Universal has been trying to figure out a way to create a sustainable, multi-level franchise with its monsters.
It's not hard.
Well,
what are they doing?
Okay, Justin is eventually going to explain to the Hollywood big shots what they should be doing. But let's look at the facts of the case. Throughout the 90s, various directors, various Joe Dante and John Landis and Steven Spielberg type directors were attached to projects like a Creature from the Black Lagoon remake or a Mummy remake, which in 1999 happened and was a huge success.
I think originally it was supposed to be a George Romero Mummy-directed film. I don't know if that one was at Universal, though.
I believe Joe Dante was attached to it as well. Mm-hmm. So Stephen Sommers' The Mummy in 1999 spawned its own franchise and spawned a spin-off franchise.
Do you know that The Mummy Returns came out a year after The Mummy was a hit? That's how quick the turnaround was on the sequel.
Now, we're going to be getting to the recent Dark Universe soon, but I think...
There's only one movie in it, so there's not that much to talk about.
I think technically there are two, are there not?
Nope,
is Dracula
one.
Untold?
Nope, that is actually separate from the Dark Universe, because that came many, many years before.
Well, we'll get to both of those shortly, but let's begin with, in 2004, flush with success from The Mummy, Universal recruited the same director, Stephen Sommers, to create a new franchise that would harness Universal's proud monster legacy for a new generation and create a brand new franchise. I refer, of course, to the Hugh Jackman vehicle Van Helsing.
Now, if you weren't on the internet during the time of this movie's production, it was a big deal. because the Universal monsters were suddenly getting more attention. For the first time, they had proper special edition DVD box sets put out, which if you open it up, maybe there's a ticket for Van Helsing inside.
Okay, I'm old enough to remember in 1999, when I was 10 years old, there was a Burger King promotion with, like, you get little toys at Burger King of all the classic monsters, you know, Lugosi, Dracula, Karloff, Frankenstein, all that.
So there's Dracula, there's Frankenstein, Creature from Black Lagoon, never gets any respect.
The Wolfman.
The Invisible Man.
Phantom of the Opera, technically. He sometimes gets lumped into Claude Rains' Phantom of the Opera.
Also, according to Van Helsing, the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
I love those 40s monster rally movies like House of Frankenstein, where you see the trailer and it'll say, not one, not two, but 5 monsters. Frankenstein's monster, Dracula. And then by the end, they're like, mad scientist, Hunchback.
It's like, this is all we got, guys. Come on. And so Van Helsing, I remember it coming out. I did not see it theatrically.
Why not?
My parents wouldn't take me to it.
Yeah.
That's why. That's the only reason.
I'll tell you why I didn't see it theatrically. I was 15, and I thought I was too good for it.
Wow, really?
I saw that the reviews were bad, and I said, I'm sophisticated. I'm going to be seeing sophisticated movies this summer, like Fahrenheit 9/11.
Yep. And now look where both of us are at this point of our lives.
We're watching,
talking about Van Helsing.
We're watching Van Helsing.
And so this is a movie that I remember seeing it and going, I do not like this. And
wow.
I think I found it. I mean, I don't think. I know, watching it every time. Too much stuff. This movie was also supposed to feature the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and they storyboarded it out, and Stephen Sommers actually went, that's maybe one monster too many in this movie.
I don't want to get too deep into the plot, but Hugh Jackman plays Van Helsing. You know him, you love him, the Dracula hunter. He's not Edward von Sloan as he is in the 1931. He's not an old guy. He's a young, sexy, swashbuckling anti-hero. Some say he's a killer. Some say he's a hero. Maybe he's a combination of the two.
Some say that Hugh Jackman ain't doing much in this movie. Kind of playing the straight man to the silliness around him.
Well, he's certainly in a lot of it.
Yes, he is. I would say he has a fun, iconic suit, big old hat that he wears the entire time, lots of steam-powered weapons that he utilizes through this film. Here's what I'll say about Van Helsing. It's most famously known for having hideous CGI effects, to which I say it does.
Yes.
Especially the Brides of Dracula, horrible looking. It's also known as being very video gamey. Yes, you are correct.
Yes.
What I'll also say about this movie is Stephen Sommers loves this stuff. He loves it. He loves he's making this movie.
I actually think we're not too far apart on this movie, even though I didn't like it.
Yes, I did not pick it thinking you would go, wow, I love this movie, Justin. You've opened my eyes.
Well, here's the thing, though. Watching this movie for the first time, which is, by the way, over 2 hours.
Way too long.
I was exhausted.
I will say, I always fall asleep watching it.
Yeah. I thought it was an eyesore. I thought, there's so much action.
Do you know who shot it?
Who?
The guy who shot E.T., all the early Spielberg movies.
Wow. Okay, there you go.
You gotta watch it like me in 4K HDR, which is the way that I viewed it.
Well, what I will say about it, though, is I did recognize, I like The Mummy, I recognize that Stephen Sommers has his heart in the right place, and this movie has a certain vibe to it. It's not really self-serious. A lot of it is very consciously campy. The performance by Richard Roxburgh as Dracula, in particular,
absolute bananas.
Playing it to the rafters.
Yeah, just screaming the entire time. I like the part he's like, I'm hollow.
Yeah.
Love it.
All the Brides of Dracula, of course, are doing, similar right performances.
And I think that Stephen Sommers, for a movie that's 2 hours long, he is terrified of an audience becoming bored, but he's not doing it in the way that people were doing in the late 90s and early 2000s. It's filled with for a film with as much CG as it has so many fun in-camera tricks where there'll be a Bride of Dracula in the background, and then somebody will run and they'll bump into the actor, or Richard Roxburgh is giving his speech oh my god, I can't believe, and he'll suddenly start walking on the wall in a practical effect on wires going up. There's that love there, even though that every time I watch it I'm like, oh, it's too much. Too much.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain vibe in it, a certain attitude that is not a million miles removed from Rob Zombie's The Munsters. Well, they both have a kind of
What is the difference between this and Godzilla Final Wars?
I think Godzilla Final Wars, which is a movie that we both love, it's structured a little bit better.
Yes.
I mean, it's also like overwhelming and chaotic, but the first half of Godzilla Final Wars is very heavily focused on the human stuff, all the Matrix ripoff stuff, and the second half is focused on the monsters.
Yes. The problem with Van Helsing is it starts at 120 miles per hour.
Yes.
And it's just at 120 the entire, there's nowhere for it to go. Like by the end, they're like, we finally found it. Dracula's castle in the ice dimension. And you're like, how is this different from the last castle that we visited?
And I think there's a bit of a disconnect between the spirit of the movie, which is you can tell Stephen Sommers wants to do a little bit of Army of Darkness here. He wants to have that kind of kitschy tone.
Yeah.
But there's the blockbuster scale of the production, and also Hugh Jackman is not Bruce Campbell.
No, he's not.
It's a very po-faced performance.
And he's also doing all this Universal monster stuff, and you can tell that Stephen Sommers studied this stuff, but it's all within the context. And spoiler alert, folks, this is what this whole episode is going to be about. Why are these action movies? It doesn't make any sense. This is not why people like these properties, but this is the only way the studio can understand making a movie that makes tons of money. That is one of the most famous things that they own.
Well, because horror movies are exploitation movies. Horror movies are afterthoughts. Horror movies are Paramount in the 1980s saying, we'll greenlight that Friday the 13th Part 4.
Because we know it'll bring in the bucks, but we don't like it.
We're not proud of it. What these movies that we're talking about are big brands. This is movie studios looking at Dracula and saying, well, why isn't Dracula Iron Man? We can make Dracula into Iron Man because everyone knows Dracula.
You're getting ahead of ourselves, but like in this movie, though, one of the things that's an issue with Van Helsing is that, like, we like the monsters because we like Lon Chaney Jr.'s, alcohol riddled face turning into the werewolf. In Van Helsing, the werewolf is nothing. It's just a CGI creation.
Yeah.
That's like jumping around and doing stuff. It could be anybody.
Well, yeah. I mean, the movie doesn't have a lot of texture or a lot of weight.
It's like, what is Dracula in this movie? He's a guy that acts big the entire time. That's pretty much it.
I think you'll agree that Stephen Sommers' The Mummy is pretty fun, though.
Yeah, I like Stephen Sommers' The Mummy.
And why is that more fun than this?
I think he's working with less money. I think that's a big difference why, especially a lot of people like the first Mummy more than they like the second. So it can't be everything all at once, and that when the moments happen, especially in the pockets, like he can do fun little horror stuff in The Mummy and then have his big action climax at the end. But in Van Helsing, it's just like everything is the climax of a movie, hence making it like mean nothing.
It feels odd to say this about The Mummy, which I'm sure was a very expensive movie that's like 2 hours long, but it feels lighter than Van Helsing. And it feels offhand.
I also think that the performances in The Mummy are much more engaging. Everything in Van Helsing, they're so caricatured. Hugh Jackman is not a grounding force in Van Helsing. He is a cartoon like everybody else around him. While when you have Brendan Fraser, he is fun to watch. It is enjoyable to see him go through these big things happening around him.
Well, yeah, Brendan Fraser is kind of in keeping with the tone of the movie. Like he's sort of, you take him seriously, but not that seriously.
Yes. The thing is that like The Mummy is more like a pulp adventure kind of thing with, obviously inspired very heavily by Raiders of the Lost Ark. Van Helsing is a Saturday morning cartoon. Those are two different things. And watching 2.5 hours of one cartoon is tough on a person.
Now, before we go further, I'd like to double back just a little bit to a little interlude of the 1990s. These characters all came to the screen in very high-profile adaptations, helmed by major auteurs. There was Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola.
Fun movie.
Mary Shelley's Frankenstein by Kenneth Branagh.
Bad movie.
And Wolf by Mike Nichols.
Terrible movie.
What do we make of this era? Because this is odd. This is like the prestige monster era,
What's interesting about these movies is that they all kind of tackle these topics in different ways. Like Francis Ford Coppola was like, I'm going back to the text. Yeah, just like Jess Franco did. But he's also like, he made the decision of we're going to do all in-camera effects. It will have a very kind of German expressionist feel to it all. That is his approach to it.
With a little bit of Roger Corman as well, like the ripe colors.
While Kenneth Branagh making Frankenstein, he's like, I want it to be classy, and I will go back to the original text.
And you're going to see me with my shirt off.
But you can also get the sense that, like, I don't really like making this kind of movie, so I'm trying to class it up in a different way. If you love Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein, you're allowed to. It just doesn't do much for me.
And Mike Nichols' Wolf, I think you'll agree, dead on arrival.
Oh, awful. And Mike Nichols' Wolf, a friend said it best. He's like, If you imagined a film where Jack Nicholson and James Spader are doing wire work at the end of the movie, and you said this happened, you would assume it's the best movie of all time.
Yeah.
Then you watch it, it's just boring.
Man, the sight, all the Wolfman scenes in that movie are in slow motion, right?
Yeah.
And the sight of Jack Nicholson...
Rick Baker doing the werewolf effects, too.
I know, Jack Nicholson in, like, human people clothes, but with Wolfman, like, hair, just prowling around in slow motion. It's an image that stuck with me, but not in a good way.
And you would think that, like, oh, it'll be so funny, right? Jack Nicholson, like, acting like a wolf, and it gets old real fast.
It's burdened with a lot of self-importance.
The classic late period Mike Nichols touch.
So Van Helsing underperformed financially. The monsters are put back in their closet. Until, of course, the Avengers.
And then all the studios go, what can we do? What do we have a connected cinematic universe that we can build? What's funny about the Avengers is, like, people know who Captain America was. No one had an affinity for Captain America. Neither did they have an affinity for Iron Man or especially Thor.
That's true.
So it's like they built it out of nothing. And like no one took the lesson from these things. Instead, the lesson they took is, wait, if we have properties people know and we make them into superheroes, and perhaps we're inspired by another TV show that's very popular around this time.
Well, I'm sure you're thinking of Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Because 2014's Dracula Untold.
Here's the thing, Dracula Untold. I mean, we're digging this bad boy up just to bury him again.
Yeah, dog shit. Get out of here. Hate it.
Starring the charisma dynamo, Luke Evans.
Oh, can't get enough.
And the lesson that, they learned was people want origin stories. Don't you want to know that, like, where Dracula came from? His fights with the Turkish army, wanting to take away his people's children?
Well, I'm reminded of that Patton Oswalt joke. Do you like Angelina Jolie? Well, here's John Voight's ballsack.
It's like, oh, you like ice cream? You like ice cream? How about some rock salt? It's like, no, I don't want this.
So it turns out Dracula's actually a pretty good guy, or he was. He was Vlad of Impaler
he was
fame.
A bad guy. When we meet him, he's a good guy again.
That's right. He's fighting the Turks. The Sultan wants an army of boys, and he's got to stop that.
Yeah, he goes, no. So we get all our favorite Dracula bits. And by that, I mean, he turns into bats. They tied onto this image, and that's what most of the movie is.
So I said that I wasn't crazy about Van Helsing, but that movie...
compared to Dracula Untold.
...is so much more fun. I mean, also, Van Helsing is so much less of an eyesore than this movie, which is CGI goop.
Ugh.
It looks like
no care to anything.
CGI charcoal. That's what it is.
Yeah, no color. This is a post-underworld film. But what do you see of Dracula in this? Like, why would people who love the universal horror Dracula, like, go see Dracula Untold? And what are they supposed to take away from it?
If you gave him another name and you said he wasn't Dracula.
Yeah, Vampire Man, super guy.
Yeah. If it was Game of Thrones with a vampire, I wouldn't necessarily think this was a Dracula adaptation.
No, but you would not like the movie because it's bad.
Yeah.
So that's the stumbling block here.
Earlier, he said that a problem with all these revivals is that they're not scary. They're action movies. And that is very fundamental with these characters, because these characters, the whole reason that they were appealing in the first place is they were speaking to or tapping into something in the collective unconscious that was bothering everyone. Like Dracula, there's something in there about like Victorian prudishness regarding matters of sex.
Oh, also, watch out for those immigrants.
Yes, there's some of that. The Frankenstein and the Frankenstein monster. This is happening at a time during the Industrial Revolution when, people are saying, what is the place of God? Like, is man overreaching,
Same thing with the Invisible Man.
Well,
what if we push science too far?
Right. And all of these things are things that could still be relevant. And yet the people who are greenlighting these movies and making them are not thinking about it that way.
No. Well, I mean, we'll get to it a little bit later, but there was pre-pandemic plans for them to hand it off to someone else to make little movies, but it hasn't really happened yet, and we'll see if it will.
Well, the last movie I saw in a movie theater before the pandemic was, Lee Whannell's The Invisible Man, which I thought was pretty good.
Yeah, I like The Invisible Man.
And I mean, it was speaking very directly to sort of like the post-Me Too moment, where like the Invisible Man in that movie was a sort of like Predator guy.
Yeah, a Hollow Man, if you will.
Yeah, and that was a movie, whether you like it or not, that was making an attempt to speak to, well, how could this character be scary in the current moment?
Yeah, and like it's a woman who's being attacked by an invisible man, and no one will believe her that it's happening.
Right. And this year, a movie called Megan, which was a hit. And I mean, I don't love Megan or anything, but like it was a hit. And it was almost kind of it didn't say this, but it was reconfiguring the Frankenstein story to make it about fear of AI and the algorithm and stuff like that.
But we just wanted to see dolls, Will. Dolls dancing, the new pop hits.
Or maybe it was Child's Play reconfigured to the current moment. It was some archetype reconfigured to the current moment. And
Yeah.
I don't think you'll find that in Dracula Untold.
No, you will not.
Frankly, Twilight spoke more to the current. I thought it was dog shit, obviously,
Yes.
but like,
Well, you saw everyone in theaters.
well, listen, money don't lie. You know, that movie spoke to someone in the current moment.
Oh, it absolutely did.
Yeah.
And so, like, after Dracula Untold, you'll be shocked to hear, failed financially.
Even though it ended with "Let the games begin,"
In the present day.
implying that the games are about to begin.
I'm like,
They say-
what
they
did
say that-
Dracula do?
They say
during the
that
entire-
line twice in the movie, and each time I was just clapping and cheering and like, yeah, let's let the games begin.
There was no post-credit stinger where, like, I don't know, Frankenstein's monster shows up or something like that. But they keep, other companies do it. How could we forget the classic Max Landis script, Victor Frankenstein, starring
yeah.
Daniel Radcliffe?
Did you see that one?
No. Why would I go see that?
Well, I don't know.
And you also have, like, Universal was scrambling. At one point, they offered Guillermo del Toro, like, do you want to be kind of like the head runner? And he turned it down.
Instead, he made a Creature from the Black Lagoon movie. Yeah.
And he says he kind of regrets turning it down. That like, maybe I could have done something with that. But, they kept looking, they kept announcing stuff, and then it wasn't happening until they make their big announcement. They got all the stars lined up. Javier Bardem, Johnny Depp, maybe Angelina Jolie. She was never officially confirmed.
Russell Crowe and the man who saved movies, Tom Cruise.
in The Mummy.
Now, you saw The Mummy in theaters, right?
Oh, I did.
So didn't you remember that feeling when you see the Universal logo and then you swerve to the other side of the planet and it says Dark... I mean, we've been watching Universal movies for 100 years now, and we never knew that on the other side of that planet
There's a
it
dark universe.
said Dark Universe.
If you just went around, if you see like Universal Studios, it's still there. It says Dark Universe.
If you want, go watch, I don't know, Showboat or some like Universal movie from like 80 years ago, and just think, when you see that logo, it says Dark Universe on the other side.
And so The Mummy, the Tom Cruise one, is a baffling choice to reboot the franchise for a number of reasons. Numero uno, all people will think of is the Stephen Sommers, Brendan Fraser, The Mummy film. So I hope they're doing something radically different in their version. They are not.
I disagree. I think they are.
You don't think Tom Cruise is doing basically a Brendan Fraser style performance in this movie?
He's doing a Chris Pratt style performance.
Yeah, he
Big
is.
difference. No, they're making a radical decision to drain it of all fun and energy.
And color. There's no color in this movie.
I mean, yeah, the Tom Cruise Mummy basically is meant to look like, it looks like the worst of the Marvel movies, that kind of like dishwater beige sheen.
It's a blue and teal look, which was really popular in the 2010s.
A little bit of Nolan exploitation in there as well,
I mean, it was directed by Alex Kurtzman, one of the terrors of screenwriting of the last 15 years. He wrote such films as Star Trek, the second one that didn't have Khan in it. Anything with magic blood, he was involved in it.
So I think Tom Cruise is a problem in this movie.
I agree. I don't know what he's trying to do. He is way too old to be playing this role.
That's the main thing.
Yes.
I think his late period really clicks into focus with some of the later Mission Impossible movies and Maverick, where obviously he's still trying to look younger than he is, but it's sort
He's
of
Tom Cruise.
But it's repositioning him as the last of the best. And in this one, it's supposed to be this one and American Made, which came out around the same time.
I never saw American Made.
Well, in that one, he's supposed to be like 35 or something, and he's got like the full on Justin Bieber haircut, and he's like, hey guys, I'm still young, right?
And another thing about this movie is it never figures out what people like about The Mummy. We didn't mention The Mummy when we were talking about those Universal monsters because he is one of those creatures that no one can really figure out. Even in the Steven Sommers version, he's barely the Mummy for that much. Even in the original Universal horror version, he's barely the Mummy for that long of a period before he turns into Boris Karloff. Like the one that I think has the most bandage-wrapped mummy guy would be like the Hammer version, where Christopher Lee plays the Mummy.
Well, there are some of the sequels, like The Mummy's Hand, from the 40s, where there's
Get the bandage guy.
Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy is probably my favorite Universal Mummy movie.
But so like this movie almost instantly is like, we don't want any of this mummy stuff. This is boring. We're going to do something else instead.
Yeah, and like you say, it's an action movie. Some of the setting up of the dark universe in this movie.
So something wild about this movie, and if you want to know if a blockbuster will stink, if there's 10 minutes of setting up the movie, you are in for a rough ride.
Well, when Russell Crowe shows up at the...
I know, that's your favorite part. Mr. Hyde, we love him, right? I can't believe...
You have the benefit of youth on your side. Russell Crowe's like 3 years younger than Tom Cruise.
Doesn't look it.
Doesn't look it, no.
I mean...
I like to think that Tom insisted that line be in the script.
The most famous thing about this movie is, of course, that trailer that leaked where they had forgotten to put the audio, so you just hear Tom Cruise being like, ah!
I also like the set photos that leaked where,
where he didn't have abs, and then suddenly he had ripped abs in the movie.
Yeah.
That's the best part. Wait, what's that? They're going in with CG and they're modifying these actors' bodies to look good? No way.
I don't believe it, no. I do think also hubris sunk this movie because Iron Man didn't announce itself as
a universe movie until the post-credit sequence.
Which even then was like... It's not like it laid out. It said more stuff's coming, but you didn't quite know what form that stuff would take.
The Tom Cruise Mummy movie is like 2 hours and 15 minutes, and like an hour of it is setting up other stuff. It's wild.
Yeah.
And it's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Nobody likes that guy. Like, nobody's like, I'm a big Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde stan.
Well, again, you've got to make a case for the character, which is... Sorry, I hate to be complimenting Marvel so much on this podcast, but look...
it succeeded, though. They did it correctly.
You can't argue with it. Like, in each of those movies, they gave you a reason to care about each of these characters in the present, and not just to set up the future of the franchise.
But what would the franchise be? Like, this movie ends with, I guess, Tom Cruise is the mummy now? Like, will he just be a guy with superpowers who can't be killed? Like, in a universe where somehow the mummy is a huge success. Like, people are like, we just want to see Tom Cruise this
thinking of Lionel Hutz, thinking about all the people...
over the rainbow. And and like, the Invisible Man movie gets made. What is that movie? He's a superhero, I guess, right?
Yeah.
That's the only way. A memoir of an Invisible Man, if you will.
Yeah.
And like, what is the Bride of Frankenstein version that Bill Condon was going to direct?
Oh, man. Hard to know. Now, Renfield just came out a few months ago, which, you know what that stinks of? It's like Universal's like, okay, well, obviously the Dark Universe didn't work out. We got to do something with these monsters. These are our monsters. We got to do something. So let's get a bunch of people in to pitch us some ideas. And then some hungry screenwriters came in and said, what if it was a Dracula movie that's about Renfield and he's in therapy for codependency?
Love it. Great. Sounds good.
And they were like, okay, that's enough.
But no. They also went, could he get superpowers as well and get into action scenes?
Oh, and you know what they also said? They also said, because studios are like the Titanic, you know, it takes a long time to steer them, and they're always heading for the iceberg.
Yep.
But ultimately, it takes a long time to steer them. And so the studio finally figured out 10 years ago that Nicolas Cage was popular online. And they were like, you know what the people on the internet really like is Nicolas Cage. They think he's epic. Can we get him in here to do epic?
You know what I will say, though? Nick Cage, best part of that movie.
Completely agree.
And not enough of him either.
I completely agree. I think Nicolas Cage, I mean, obviously there's that huge internet fan following, but I think he maintains his integrity in most of his movies.
And this is the issue.
Not all.
No. This is the issue with this movie, is that, like, it's afraid to have Dracula as a main character in the movie.
Yeah.
It's like, this is what you're making, guys. What are you doing? You gotta stop being afraid of making a Universal horror movie that has a monster in it that's about that monster. Please, for the love of God.
So this has been a tour through failure. This has been a walk down the worst memory lane in the House of Frankenstein. Oh, we didn't even mention that we watched a couple of classic Universal horror ones.
They're in the movies. The movies are barely an hour long, and they do what they're supposed to do.
I watched House of Frankenstein for the 15th time in my life,
I watched
probably.
House of Dracula, I believe, for the first time.
Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah.
Definitely the death knell to those movies.
House of Frankenstein's okay, but
yeah, it's all right.
But the monsters are really never together.
No.
And like in both of those movies, Glenn Strange as the Frankenstein monster is only at the end.
Yeah, barely appears. I mean, the same thing with Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, which actually is directed by a good director. Mm-hmm. But like, they only get together in like the last like 30 seconds of that film. What are you doing, guys? I guess that's like the monkey's paw curling, right? Because they're like, well, how about we put them together in Van Helsing and they'll be together the entire time.
But I think what we've seen over and over again is that these efforts to revive these characters are stifled from the top down by money men who don't understand the characters and merely see them as, well, that's a name that we can exploit. And it's a name that should be at the same level with Batman or something.
And what's popular now? Action movies? Yep, those are the blockbusters, so everything needs to be an action blockbuster.
These characters, I think, will never die because there's something in them that is adaptable to every moment that they're in. Oftentimes, it will take people sort of working in the margins or in the subterranean levels of the studio system to find those and have the monsters sneak up on us again like they always have.
I cannot believe that they have not successfully rebooted officially at any point the Creature from the Black Lagoon. That is bananas to me.
What's not to like? He's a creature. He's in the Black Lagoon.
That's all you got to do. And I know that like John Landis most famously was going to do a version of it. What I did not know was that they wanted Jack Arnold to direct.
Really?
This would have been
the guy who made the original one.
Yes. And this would have been a Jack Arnold 10 years removed from the Fred Williamson film Boss, where Fred Williamson said, yeah, I directed most of that film because Jack Arnold really wasn't that present.
I notice you boulderized the title of Boss. It originally had another word in it.
No, I will not be saying that word. And who had, I believe he had been directing TV for like decades up until that point.
Jack Arnold's a god. We should do an episode.
Do a Creature from Black Lagoon. I know a lot of people have done their version of Creature from Black. Just slap Universal on it, put it up. I think people, you release those movies in October, they go apeshit for it. They would love it. Like
everyone loves a Dracula.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a million Draculas. What would be the new Universal take on Dracula? I don't know. Dracula 2000, if you will.
Well, happy Halloween, everyone.
Oh, it's Shocktober in July.
Let's move on to letters. Justin, do we have any letters this week?
As per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. And our first letter is from Jules Pigot. And they ask, I've gotten very into professional wrestling in the past few years. One of my favorite phenomenons is when a wrestler tries Hollywood. In recent years, we've seen wrestlers who are genuinely good actors like Dave Bautista and to a bit lesser extent, John Cena. And we've also seen The Rock, who is very successful despite his acting ability. But then you go back and you get your Hulk Hogans, who are often hilariously bad. I was wondering...
Hey, a little respect for Thunderlips.
The Hulkster himself.
Have you seen Santa with Muscles?
Or Thunder in Paradise?
Ah, yes.
Or what about Macho Man Randy Savage? Bonesaw!
I mean, They Live is probably the greatest movie to star a professional wrestler, right?
Oh, yeah. The letter writer actually finishes. Roddy Piper in They Live has always been a particular standout to me. It was the perfect role for him.
Yeah.
Finally, I'd love to hear you guys do an episode on the UPA Animation Studio one day. Thanks, Jules.
This is not the first request we've had for the UPA Animation.
I've been mentioning it a lot. And then the What a Cartoon podcast did a very lengthy episode on it. And I was like, what else do I have to ask?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the issue.
I mean, listen, Mr. Magoo, here's the thing about him. He's nearsighted, so sometimes he'll be on a construction site and he'll be walking along steel beams in midair and he'll think it's a staircase.
I think what's interesting about UPA is the fact that they found a limited style of animation and allowed themselves to continue after being blacklisted by all the major Hollywood studios. Because they were like a union, like they got together as a collective, and that was the organization. As far as wrestlers that are actors, I mean, I love The Rock before he became the world's most popular actor. And he, destabilized the DC universe because he's boring now.
I think he changed the balance of power in the DC universe.
I actually like current day John Cena because he just allows himself to have fun now.
I think the problem with The Rock is you always see like the calculation these days. Like he's always giving interviews where he talks about like his team and his strategy and the business of it all. When you find out the Black Adam was like his passion project, like he made Southland Tales, which was like his one attempt at like an art film. And obviously that spooked him forever because he never did anything like that again.
I wish I could take The Rock aside and go, hey man, you've won.
Yeah.
Like you've won. You've won for many years. You don't need to be the winner all the time. How about you make interesting stuff? Where like The Rock in a Magnolia. I want to see that. Like that would be fun. I think he has it in him to do like really weird stuff. He did it in Southland Tales.
Because a lot of the backlash to The Rock right now, I think, is fueled by disappointment.
Well, he's bland.
Yeah, we all know he's charismatic. We all know he's good on screen. He got here for a reason, and it's sad to see him sort of betray that talent, making these really safe movies.
You look at the film that really made The Rock gain a new level of popularity, Fast Five, where he is sweaty, he's kind of jagged, and he's angry, and then watch him play that same character in Hobbs and Shaw. He's boring, he's safe, each main star has the exact same number as punches as the other. That's not what people want from him. And I don't know if he can change like into that mode because he wants to be the most popular man on planet Earth.
It's a bad look to never want to fail or to never be willing to fail.
Yes. And I mean, he's been failing like crazy, even though he's telling us, I didn't actually fail. It made money in other territories.
Yeah.
I'm not in the red. I'm not in the red. As he turns into a corn cob. But I mean, we can't forget some of the greatest wrestlers turn actors. Tor Johnson.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. How could I forget? It was a whole different era of wrestling. Yeah. I mean, Tor Johnson in...
Are you forgetting the name of the Ed Wood movie?
All of his movies. Well, because I wanted to go for a deeper cut one. I think Beast of Yucca Flats, his performance in that, just seeing him from a distance, like letting out a mighty roar and throwing a rock.
Who could forget as well George the Animal Steel playing Tor Johnson in Ed Wood.
A beautiful performance. I mean, when he rises from the grave, it's uncanny.
I'm trying to think of other... Captain Lou Albano, he was a wrestler.
Oh my God. Well, him and Wise Guys.
I've never seen Wise Guys. Is he good in it?
Yes, you've seen Wise. We watched it together.
Sorry. I thought I was thinking of the Michael Mann. Wasn't there a TV show called Wise Guys as well?
Well, maybe. I'm thinking of the Brian De Palma, Joe Piscopo joint.
Yes, we watched it. Stone-faced the entire time.
Except when Captain Lou was on screen.
A big smile on her face.
And his performance as Mario is still, I think, the definitive one.
Fuck you, Luigi. Love it. Love it so much. So yeah, I like the idea of wrestlers becoming actors because it's like being a wrestler is all about being charismatic. And you do that in a number of different ways. Does that translate to the screen? Oftentimes, no, but when it does, it's fascinating to see it play out.
I mean, it's interesting because what they do in the ring, I mean, yeah, it is about being charismatic. It's not pure athleticism.
No.
It's not like a guy can be a baseball player who's incredible but not have charisma.
Or you could be an amazing technical wrestler, and that means that you land all the moves, you can do it all perfectly, but you're not charismatic. That becomes an issue.
Yeah.
Like the Hulkster. I mean, I'm not a wrestling expert, but my friends who are say he's a terrible wrestler. Same thing with the Ultimate Warrior. Doesn't matter. They were charismatic in the ring. Now, does that translate to the screen? I mean, the Hulkman, he made a lot of movies. How can you argue with that, right? Like,
I can. I can argue.
Three Ninjas go to Wonderland.
High Noon at Mega Mountain, it was called.
Yes.
Co-starring Jim Varney. Yeah.
You can't argue with that because he's right there up on screen.
Well, okay, I won't argue with that.
Roddy Piper, in the late period of his career, he did some really fun roles on like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where he played a burnt out wrestler. Love that stuff.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, after They Live, I sort of lose touch with him because he made all sorts of direct-to-video movies that I haven't seen. Have you plundered the sort of Roddy Piper?
He's really fun in them. Yeah.
What are some good ones?
Back in Action with Billy Blanks is really good. Shot in Toronto features the Twin Dragons of Dragon Hunt.
Oh, I love those too.
Both of them to fight Roddy Piper and Billy Blanks. There's another Toronto set one because Roddy Piper was Canadian, so he's in a lot of Canadian shot movies. One that's kind of like The Warriors if it starred Roddy Piper and he ran across Toronto called Jungle Land or Jungle Zone, something like that. Jungle's in the title. And I'm trying to think, they just kind of blur together. Wait, isn't there that one that we watched? Was it me and you that watched it together? That was like Roddy Piper, Andrew Dice Clay, Shannon Tweed.
Is it? Oh.
Directed by Paul Lynch.
Oh, that's that Die Hard ripoff,
yeah,
right?
Die Hard
Roddy
ripoff.
Piper was in that?
Yeah, he plays like the third villain, and he's really fun in it.
God, yeah. I liked that movie. Yeah.
Yeah, Roddy Piper, I think out of all those actors, he was the most fun one, even though if you listen to the commentary for They Live, you're like, wait, does Roddy Piper think They Live is a documentary?
Well, it is.
It is. Consume. Randy Savage, he didn't really do that much other than Bonesaw. Same thing with Andre the Giant. Did have a bit of a run in some movies.
Well, a movie specifically.
Yes, a movie that people love. Yeah, you know what? I see a Wrestlers in Movies episode in our future.
Let's do it.
So, as per usual, you can send us letters at porncinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. What are we doing on our Patreon this week, Will?
We're talking about the sci-fi classic from 1953, Invaders from Mars, which has been newly released on a 4K Blu-ray.
And was it an easy process to get this new remaster out? It was not. So we discuss that. We discuss 50s monster movies, what scared us as children, and more. To check that out, go to patreon.com/The Important Cinema Club. Next week, we're going to do something you've heard about? That's how I'm going to sell it.
I mean, not necessarily, though. I mean, we're talking about one of the indie darlings of the 1990s.
Yeah, he was big in the 1990s. It's kind of faded away since then.
Todd Solondz.
Yeah. So Happiness, Welcome to the Dollhouse.
And then, can we watch Palindromes?
Yeah, let's do Palindromes.
I saw that one when it came out. I felt very adult.
We will not be doing Wiener Dog, where the dog gets hit by a car at the end and explodes on screen.
Too traumatic for both of us, especially you, who I think had a
wiener dog.
Yeah.
That looked exactly like the dog in the movie. That's what we'll be doing next week. Until then, my name's Justin DeClue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening. As per usual, I'd like to thank some of our new patrons, who include Adam Rockwood, Larry McCarley, Aaron Rojas, Eris Janopoulos, Tree Forest, Alex Sinesi, Joseph Jaffe, Kevin Barr, John Daniel, Chaz Pofall, Ethan Johnson, Mariano Velasco, Ken Nichols, Jim Montour, Michael O'Leary, Hayden Michael Cole, Thomas Sanscott, Mark Catapano, Alan Butt, C.Il K, Drew Cohn, Craig Lewis, Peter Brannon, Cat Weasel, Maz Hava, George Sanders, Donald Patterson, and Robert Brewery. Thank you very much for becoming patrons. We could not keep doing this without you.
Well,
The movies are back.
apparently. I mean,
Big sound, big screen.
love it. Popcorn?
Yeah, love it. Movies, popcorn.
Who could we possibly be talking about?
Mr. Tom Cruise.
That's right. Mission Impossible, the new one, is out. The affection and love and a certain amount of befuddlement and fear of Tom Cruise are at an all-time high. And well, I'll let you tell the story.
So basically, at like 3 a.m., and so I saw it when I woke up, a friend of mine messaged me and said...
You woke up at 3 a.m.?
No. He sent it at 3 a.m. I saw it in the morning.
Okay.
He said, hey, Aiden, who was a cinematographer on Impossible Horror, the feature film that I directed, and is now the videographer to the stars. I don't want to talk too much about Aiden, the nicest man in the world.
How about that? Justin a clue over here, the new Roger Corman, like giving people their start.
Yeah, so he's been the videographer for Will Smith during the period when the slap happened, too.
Oh, man.
He was in the room watching the Oscars with his family.
Oh, man.
When it happened. Jessica Chastain, to the point that Jessica Chastain, like, loves Aiden Tanner, that they started a book club together. I saw it on the Instagram, yeah. And now Tom Cruise, seemingly. So he's been following Tom Cruise around and
doing like social media content.
Yeah, basically like just filming him.
Did he do the video where Tom Cruise goes to see Tenet?
No, that was before his time. Did he shoot that popcorn? I love pop. Maybe. I'd have to ask him.
Oh, man.
And so we heard through him that like Tom Cruise is coming to an 11:20 a.m. screening of the new Mission Impossible.
In Toronto,
Canada. I don't think... Is there any other actor that I was like, I need to be there just to see that?
Jackie Chan?
Jackie Chan, probably. I think that may be it.
Yeah.
That like I would go to the screening to see them and like not interact with them or anything. And I wasn't going to go. And then Emily was like, you got to go. Like, come on. So I rushed over. And right when I walked up to the Scotiabank, I was like, this is not a secret that like Tom Cruise is going to show up. Because there were a ton of people in suits waiting to get in. Every poster had been replaced by a Mission Impossible poster. They were giving out free popcorn. I got a hat that has Mission Impossible on it. I wonder if people were genuinely surprised. Because, like, you could just buy a ticket. That's what I did and just went.
Wow.
Like, it was not, like, a press screening or anything like that. And, like, it was buzzing. I actually heard some people across from me being like, where's Aiden? Is Aiden here? Like, the Aiden fever. He had started it as well.
Wow.
You know, we watch the trailers. All the lights come up. And Mr. Tom Cruise walks out with Christopher McQuarrie, the director. And Tom Cruise, full on autopilot. Like, he's like, hey, thanks everybody for coming here. Big screen, big sound. This is the way the movies are meant to be watched. Someone did scream, I can't believe you're here. And then Tom Cruise broke from his spiel and went, well, I can't believe I'm here either. And he smiled and he looked at the crowd. I yelled, the movies are back, really loudly. Did not react to that. Said, thanks everybody. And then he left. Movie started. I got up and left because I've already seen it and I'm seeing it again. But I got my Tom Cruise fix on. Thank you, Cineplex Club membership. Use my free ticket just to go to that screening.
Wow. Incredible that you saw the man in the flesh.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not just a man anymore. He's a historic
But he
figure.
doesn't do like public appearances like that or like maybe on the red carpet. That's what he'll do.
Well, there are very few celebrities like somebody like Dwayne The Rock Johnson is always on social media like,
Yes.
hey, what up, guys? Sound off in the comments.
And he knows the name of every single person that he's met in his entire life, and he can remember them when he sees them at press circuits.
But Tom Cruise lives on a mountain somewhere. He's not accessible.
In London now.
In
as,
London.
Will revealed to me, and he went, oh, you know.
Well, so I saw somebody speculating on Twitter, like, okay, Tom lives in London, which is the only country that has successfully prosecuted Scientology. Like, what's going on? Like, is he
breaking apart? Because most people, when they break apart from Scientology, they don't say it.
Yeah.
Like, they just let it go, and maybe it'll slip up in an interview later on.
Maybe this is just wishful thinking. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
I'm just saying that if he...
Did somebody I know who worked close with Will Smith, and I asked them, hey, is Will Smith a Scientologist? And he went, no, even before this was public? Yes. So, like, they just don't like to say that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm just saying, he, like... 90% he probably is a Scientologist, but that 10% is like, well, if he was, wouldn't he be in LA where Scientology is?
Well, I mean, he famously had like join Scientology tents on like War of the Worlds and stuff like that.
Which earned the ire of Steven Spielberg, I think.
Has Tom Cruise been vocal about his Scientology recently?
Not lately.
Yeah.
I mean, I think obviously...
I wonder what the last time he was.
Well, there was... I think it's been a really long time, actually. Like, I think there was the video that leaked, obviously, the famous
He was
one.
like, hey, I'm Tom Cruise.
Like-
but that was like 10 years ago. 10, 15
Imagine if you met, if you could just tell an SP. But I mean, there was that War of the Worlds press run where he was talking about like,
Scientology a lot.
I know the history of psychiatry. You don't. And then I think obviously somebody said to him, you better fucking shut up if you still want to be Tom Cruise.
And no more kissing ladies on the lips. People don't want to see that anymore.
Yeah. I think after that press tour, he definitely took some lessons to heart.
Has he broken away from Scientology? We do not know that information. Cannot confirm and or deny.
And none of my business.
No. If he wants to do that, even though Scientology is...
Well,
oh, wait, I don't want to say anything.
yeah, listen, I don't want him to own slaves like he's alleged to have.
Or that his wife has to, run away in the dark of night to be able to escape him.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
But Christopher McQuarrie keeps working with him. Now, Tom has something on Christopher McQuarrie because every press tour he does for a Mission Impossible film, Christopher McQuarrie's like, I'd rather get leprosy than make another Mission Impossible. Then he turns around and is like, I'm making 2 back to back.
Well, I mean, maybe after, it's probably exhausting after they're done, but then maybe Christopher McQuarrie looks and says, hey, this is a pretty sweet deal I've got.
Yeah. And, we don't want to put any words in Tom Cruise's mouth, but there was a rumor going around that perhaps his sexuality was in doubt and the Scientologists had that information. And Scientology, not that I've heard this from other people, that perhaps like they'll release this information. They have blackmail information.
Well, I mean, this is what the rumor has famously been about John Travolta.
What? John Travolta's not straight?
Well, he was married for many years.
Yes.
But to a woman.
To someone like Tom Cruise, if it was revealed tomorrow that there was like a leak and it's like, Tom Cruise is gay, we have the evidence, I don't think it would affect any box office performance.
Probably not. I mean, given at this point, first of all, the way that society has changed, which doesn't mean there's not homophobia. Obviously,
There's lots of it.
There's lots of homophobia. But I mean, given everything else that he's survived, I mean, again, you alluded to, he survived the whole Katie Holmes divorce thing, which by anybody looking at that would say something weird is going on here. He survived being the most famous crazy person in
years
in the world. And I think he could survive that because, like, when Top Gun came around,
I bet you could turn around and people are like, I like Tom Cruise more now.
Yeah, it would humanize him. But
Yes.
when Top Gun came around, even like the people who hated Tom Cruise for years were like, God damn it, we're separating the artist from the art. This guy,
movie rules.
this guy knows how to make a movie.
He's the one keeping Hollywood afloat. When they go on strike, if they do, and it will have happened by the time you listen to this podcast,
The actors, the Screen Actors
yeah.
Guild.
Is Tom Cruise like coming in and he's like, you guys got to fix this?
It's interesting. I saw a clip of Tom Hanks being asked about, Hollywood's other famous Tom. I mean,
Yeah, Tom is definitely Hanks, not the one keeping his movies afloat, making the quality control there.
I saw Tom Hanks being interviewed about it or asked about it, and he gave a 5-minute answer where he really prevaricated and was like, there's a solution for everyone.
Ugh.
And listen, Tom Hanks, Tom Cruise, they're management now.
Yeah.
They're not actors, they're not writers. I mean, they are, but ultimately they're management.
The issue with SAG going on strike is Tom Cruise can't make his next Mission Impossible movie. It's not done yet. They have one big sequence left to shoot. So he will probably blow some doors down, I feel, to get that done. And he won't be able to do press anymore either.
Wow.
That's why he's pushing all this stuff at rapid speed. I saw that day I saw him in Toronto. He was also in Atlanta, Georgia, going in front of a screening.
God, the thing, I mean, I think that is almost as impressive as him motorcycling off a cliff.
I
Just the
agree.
sheer number of cities he can visit in a day and keep the Tom Cruise thing going.